Hi, I'm Anna Spencer, and today we have a very special occasion. Some very fine people have been holding an inquiry into climate change for the last 5 weeks, and every week we've been getting together and talking about some aspect of climate change and some particularly interventions that have been proposed as ways of reversing global warming or containing it in some way. And there are quite a number of these proposals. I have a list of 40 some odd proposals that I suppose somebody regards as credible, and most of them are actually familiar to me. But there are too many of us, too many of these ideas for us to examine in detail. So I picked a list of 20 of these proposals, many of which you would call geoengineering proposals. And I don't mind that word, although many of my friends say, shh, don't use that word. But we're talking largely about things that would be technologically helpful in reducing global warming or reversing it. So we have spent the last month or more looking at these sequentially every week. And today we're going to give it another look, all of them, all 20 of them, and reconsider our original votes. Now, Mike McCracken proposed that we develop a scoring system with 3 categories. Mike, why don't you say what you would mean by 1, 2, and 3? I'm going to suggest. I like your idea. I think it's very helpful, and with the exception that I think we should not claim too much for our evaluations. Some of you guys are experts. I am not. Some of us are, maybe half and half. I don't know. And in any case, we haven't given these enough thought to claim that we've investigated this in great detail. But we have given them some thought, and it's worth something. But we just shouldn't promote our conclusions as extremely authoritative. But when we're through, I hope we'll have a document that people can take and use for lobbying or whatever you want to use it for. And Mike, would you explain what you think we should mean by 1, 2, and 3 as we evaluate these proposals?
Well, one was the notion of things that are sort of pretty well proven and reasonably well established. They may need more research in particular applications, but one was the ones that are in pretty good shape. 3 are the ones that are sort of not do them at all, don't consider them at all. And then the 2 was just a broad category of the ideas people have that have some indications that they may be potentially successful, but really haven't been proven and demonstrated to be effective yet, and that are worth sort of pursuing and looking at to see if they could make a difference in some sort of decade or 2 or a couple of decades. And I think so. That was broadly what it was.
Okay, so, I think that's a good solution. Is everybody agreeable to the 3 categories? Okay. Yes, Robert. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Mike, do you contemplate some kind of scalability criterion to distinguish ideas which might be attractive environmentally and locally, but which are unlikely to have much global impact?
Yeah, I was sort of debating whether there should be a 4th category that is beneficial to do, but not related to reducing temperature change and everything. I mean, there are some like that come up that way that are preserving biodiversity or something, and things like that. But I just sort of felt it started getting hard to differentiate, and one might choose three. You're exactly right that a number of these may not have much global effect. Collectively, they could in some of the policy actions. Imposing a carbon tax in one country doesn't necessarily do a lot. If everybody imposes a carbon tax, that would presumably have some beneficial effects in limiting further change. May not reduce change from where we are now, but it would limit further change. So it was just a way of trying to differentiate a little bit between them. Most of the ones that were sort of unanimous sort of fit in the top category. And then we had some ones that were nobody wanted to fit in the bottom, and most of the rest go in the middle. I don't know quite how to prioritize things, but welcome other ideas.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how many we put in category one, because I really can't predict. I think we will put fewer in category one than we may have intended earlier. Sev, yes, and then I want to get busy pretty quickly. Yes.
Yeah. What about going with Mike's idea of a three-way thing first, and later on we can take those three categories and do the scalability side of things afterwards?
We could do that if there's time, or people can do it privately afterward if you want. I'm recording this, by the way. You guys are all going to be famous movie stars. All your friends are going to call you tonight and give you Oscars. So this will be posted to Substack, which is why I want to do it expeditiously. Would you like to do that? We'll do this and see what we can accomplish within the time that we may be able to put on the air, and then if we run a little bit over that, I expect that, and then we may need to actually form a committee to God knows what we will need to do. But
Yeah, I might just say, I mean, in answer to Robert, Chris, I mean, there's almost nothing that is the single thing that is going to do it. I mean, it's going to be some combination of a whole bunch of steps that have to be taken. We've dawdled so long, we're at the state where we really have to do everything we can.
that's my point of view, that we need actually to emphasize publicly that there are many, many, many things that could be helpful, and we don't know which have the most promise. But we shouldn't just sit around and say the only thing that is reasonable is AI. That I think is the silly thing, that we just focus, and people think that geoengineering is nothing but SAI, which is certainly not the case. Yeah, Robin.
I was just noting that, and this is maybe the second layer of discussion after we do the initial go through, is that there are, I've got the three categories written down, and correct me if I haven't got them quite right, Mike. Proven and established is one, some possibility worth looking at but not proved, and three, should not be considered. There are going to be some that may not be proved but would be most worthwhile and urgent and most effective. So they might be a category two, but because they're not proven and established. But they could be actually the most important. So we should be careful not to consider, that this is 1, 2, 3 in terms of a gradation, with one as the most important, because it could be the most important is number two.
Yes, I sort of agree with that. I lumped both 1 and 2 into that first category, so it wasn't just totally proven, but conceptually proven, but needs research or something, or needs more, more attention and details and things. But yeah.
Building on Robin's point, perhaps we go and keep things simple with the 1, 2, 3, which has a lot to do with how much it's proven. Then at the very last round, if there's time, prioritize. It might be that, following Robin's suggestion, is that our highest priority is actually in category 2, it's not proven, but we think it's a big deal. So that would be a way to get through the 1, 2, 3, hopefully expeditiously, and then one final round to see prioritize.
Okay, Mike, I think Mike should reply to that because think we're considering your proposal.
I think that's fine.
So
I mean, there's also people who would sometimes say it's better to have an even number of categories than an odd number, except, gardeners and decorators who always want to do something with odd numbers. But yeah, we're aiming for an order from the top down and not the most likely in the middle or something. But
okay,
yeah.
so
I'm fine with Gregory's comment. Yeah.
So we're talking now 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that it?
No.
No, 3, 1, 2, 3. But you restate what 1 means now to you.
No, you may have a 1A or something like that.
Well, no, my suggestion is that 1 means exactly what Mike said it meant, and so does 2, and so does 3. After we complete that, we return and we prioritize issues from categories 1 and 2 that we think should be pursued more aggressively.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now, let's start off. The first meeting that we had, we considered 5 different proposals, and they were all things that could be done by officials, governments, or some, international or national governing outfits. Things like, for example, I started off with the Albedo Accord, but we decided that it probably didn't belong there yet.
That was for me sort of a category 2. It takes a very long time to try and work on an international accord. Important as dealing with albedo may be, but so I put it in a 2 because I just think it takes a lot of work.
Uh-huh. That's probably what we had in mind when we kind of put it aside, but we can vote on it now if you want to vote on it. Let's do it. Let's say, are we 1, 2, or 3 on the Albedo Accord?
You're not voting, so 1, 2,
No,
3, 5.
voting, but you're. How are you doing this?
I'm going to count the fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 2. Okay.
All right, very good. Now, carbon fee and dividend is what we called it here to avoid calling Seth. We're through. I think he's got you down. Now, the carbon fee and dividend is what is more familiarly called carbon taxation, and so everybody knows what that is, I think. But it's carbon taxation, but the money goes back to the general public for the most part. All right, let's take your vote now. Sev is 1. Arndt is 1.
4,
Gregory
5.
is 1. No, 2. Mike is 1. Robert Chris is 1. Rose is 1. And Alexei is 2.
Can I just say that every COP tries to get a firm commitment to carbon fees and dividends cooperatively at a global scale and fails. And so I thought I put it in the same category as the Albedo Accord for the same reason, is that the international cooperation is a long slog, and it certainly has not gotten there.
Okay.
You don't need to have international cooperation. A single nation could do it.
Well, I thought that.
Well,
Each country could do it.
In fact, the USA ought to do it, even if it's just going to use it to pay off debts or something like that. But yeah.
Gregory, did you change from 1 to 2?
I've been on carbon fee and dividend. I'm 2 and have been.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had 6 at 1, but it might be 5. I had 6 at 1 and 2 at 2. Okay, that's correct.
Now let's go to international climate finance. That's a very obscure category. I think the thought there is that the rich countries have been most responsible for global warming, and that the poorer countries we owe them something and should help them. So the rich countries should be collectively supporting growth development in in the poor countries.
Can I ask, is it support for economic development, or is it this
No,
this damage and loss fund that is proposed to reimburse countries for loss? Because that's a very hard option to continue indefinitely, as they suggest, because it's sort of 1 billion supporting 7 billion for damage and loss indefinitely.
I made a note here that we explicitly said that the financing of this kind would be for mitigation only and not for damages for the
Okay.
injustices. So that's what it means.
I've got 1 for 1 and 7 for 2.
Uh-huh. All right. Okay, thank you. Now let's go to the fossil fuel subsidies ban.
6, 7. That's everybody, all 8 at 1.
Uh-huh. A treaty and funding for research and development in various geoengineering technologies. Any discussion of this before we vote? All right, so let's vote. How many think that's?
I don't, if it's a treaty, it seems like it would involve international cooperation and negotiation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it should be agreement or something like that, or coordination of or something.
Just because of the politics, I would go too.
In other words, you don't like the word treaty, but
Well, I'm fine with the word treaty. It's just when I see the word treaty, I see tremendous international cooperation challenges. So it's a 2 and not a 1 for me.
Yeah, you wouldn't
I
have.
would agree with Gregory on that. The feasibility of creating such a treaty is in the short term a bit of a stretch. So it is a long term project, but nonetheless a very important one.
Yeah, I don't think you'd have a treaty for R&D funding. You would have an agreement for R&D funding.
Yeah.
Some kind of endorsement.
In which case, I'll go with 1.
Yeah, or sort of group of willing nations.
Exactly.
What do they call this? The COP thing, the Paris.
The Paris is not a treaty; it's an agreement.
Coalition of the willing.
It's an accord, I think. Actually, Paris is
an accord. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
The official word is the accord.
I like that.
But it was not a
the
treaty
coalition of the willing is sort of. Andrew Light's been talking a lot about that recently. Is countries getting started? That's how the Clean Air International Agreement started. Was the few nations about working on short-lived gases, and now it's 120 nations or something. So
all right, let's do our vote now.
8 ones.
I see 8. Very good. And regenerative agriculture. I guess that's the proposal that nations should be engaged with promoting agricultural reforms of this kind. Any ambiguity about what that means? All right, let's have
it does have a little bit of overlap, it seems to me, with the biochar that was discussed in the last meeting, but that's an overlap. That's not necessarily a complicating factor.
This is one of those things, though, that is really beneficial to do for a lot of different reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And everything. It's probably not going to have a whole lot of effect in terms of global average temperature, but it's, and CO2, but it's something to do for lots of reasons. And that's what's when I was thinking about the categories, something I had a real struggle with, wondering if we're going to talk about, multiple reasons, if that's also something an argument for sustainability and sustainable development goals and stuff. So,
well, this is also interesting because it could be civil society. I mean, regenerative agriculture may not require the state to be front and center so much as
right.
Social movement and so forth.
Okay, let's take our vote.
8, 2, 4, 6, 8.
Okay. All right, now let's go on to the second meeting. And the occasion there was simply this is the kind of thing that the discussion was relevant to currently mainstream thinking about how to solve global warming. That is, you primarily reduce emissions of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Everybody agrees we ought to do that. It's very important. And some people stop there. Lots of people stop there and are not in favor of much of anything else. But I think that was the general, the reason I clustered these interventions together on that says a second meeting. Now, one is methane regulation. And I think that is just doing what you can to make sure that less methane is being emitted from factories or maybe even rice fields, whatever we can to reduce the amount of emissions of methane into the atmosphere. Is that clear what we're voting on?
Leaking pipelines and coal mines and other things, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It is just
Meta, can we change that to methane regulation and enforcement? Because regulation without enforcement is useless.
All right. Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yeah.
Except the enforcement is much more difficult, so it kind of wanders between 1 and 2.
Although the interesting thing was there was a satellite for a while that could detect where the sources were. It was finding a lot of inadvertent
So that's verification.
places where people weren't spotting it. So you can spot some of the big releases from the satellite. Unfortunately, the satellite didn't failed after whatever 2 years or something. But yeah,
I didn't know that. Okay.
it's the approach that's being used for CFCs in some extent too. And fluorocarbons is there's actually an international program that tries to use remote sensing of very type satellite airplanes and everything to try and find CFC, the chlorofluorocarbon things, HFCs and everything, because there's a big gap right now between what national inventories are and what atmospheric chemists are saying must be coming out to give the chemical signals we're getting. So
I have a question it was Sev, you raised enforcement, right? Was it you?
Yeah.
So I think you could argue enforcement for all of the above, and maybe we should use that as that second discussion we go through. Would you be comfortable with saying regulation and verification rather than enforcement? Because the verification is kind of what Mike is talking about, and it leads into, okay, now we know it's happening, therefore we must do something about it. But maybe the enforcement can be that second level that we were talking about after we get through the 20, as to viability levels, and without enforcement, you're right, it's useless, right? But it could be done, but it might not be enforceable.
How does everyone else feel about it?
I suggest that the second, when we go back afterward and reevaluate, we give everything 1, 2, or 3 now. Then we would go back and we make a pass through saying, how feasible do we think each of these is? And feasibility would include enforcement and other, logistical kinds of considerations. Because I think that's what we want to do is filter out what can be done and what are just pipe dreams. Is that what you guys would agree on?
Well, I think in this case, it's a pretty complicated issue because there are so many different sources of methane, some of which are a no-brainer to capture and might even make economic sense in the sense that it's a valuable resource that's being wasted into the atmosphere. In other cases, it's almost impossible to capture it. I mean, you can capture methane out of landfills, but swamps a little bit more tricky. Thawing of permafrost and so on and so forth, again, much more tricky. So I think this is a little bit of a wide category to have a single answer to. But
okay, I want to get a procedural decision now without much.
Yeah, no, I think Aaron makes a good point. And maybe we can put the verification side in that second feasibility, as part of the feasibility part, because verification will enable tracking of certain kinds of methane release, but certainly not others. So
maybe just say methane emissions reductions and put the other aspects second category.
Yeah, that's better, because you can't regulate permafrost.
Okay. All right. Have we agreed on that? And we're going to make a second pass through, and when we do it, we'll be looking for verification and feasibility and other ways to get it, right? Okay, good. Now,
Is the language changed?
Yeah, now it's methane emissions reductions.
Okay.
methane emissions.
And it could be generalized to short-lived species too, because doing black carbon also makes a difference. And there's some other, I think some of the HFCs are also considered short-lived species, and people have ideas about how to reduce those. So it's sort of methane and short-lived species emissions.
Okay. Yeah.
Would
Let's do that.
everybody agreed if I insert that?
And short.
I'm not sure that term is familiar. Short-lived species. I wouldn't know what that was. Are you going to have to? Is that the kind of language we really want to put in?
It is concise, although it requires a bit of explanation. So leave it in. It goes well. It's understandable.
Species.
Okay, we got methane emissions and short-lived.
So it's like black carbon, and then the other one is tropospheric.
And short-lived species.
Is it short-lived species emissions as well?
Is your problem with short-lived or with species?
Species to me is
species just means greenhouse. Species is a technical word for greenhouse gases.
Is it? Okay, all right.
Well, it can include black carbon, which is also as an aerosol, but yeah.
I see. All right. So a species, I've learned something. Thank you.
I mean, it turns out if you do the calculations, which I did, so for emissions that you control during the 21st century that you can control, about half of the additional radiative forcing is from CO2, a quarter is from methane, and a quarter is from tropospheric ozone. And so getting rid of tropospheric ozone can also be very important, but it's not something that's emitted. It's something, there are precursors that are emitted and stuff. So
if I put this in as methane and short-lived species emission reduction, everybody will be happy. That's what we're talking about, right? And
yes.
Okay, let's take a vote again.
Except I don't know how to rate this one. It's proven and established.
Well, yeah, and it's an international initiative that has been going for about the last 10 years or something. So
it's not a possibility. It's not a possibility we're looking at, something we actually are doing.
Yeah, I mean, actually,
okay.
Yeah, there's an interesting UNEP report that did calculations on it 10 years ago or something, maybe even more, 20 years ago. So, yeah.
Okay, let's vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Rose? Okay, let's go into utility scale renewable energy systems. The use of solar and wind and geothermal and God knows, maybe.
I would just say that it also needs to include transmission networks, because right now that's a big holdup. I was just at the seminar where 4 South American countries were talking about the problem and the need for transmission, and the U.S. certainly needs it.
Yeah. So add transmission networks.
Utility scale renewable energy systems and transmission networks. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got 8.
So Meta, I think you skipped energy efficiency and electrification.
Energy efficiency and electrification. Thank you, Gregory. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, we got 8 there. We're all on.
What do we say when we're saying electrification? What do we mean by that?
Replacing fossil fuels with electricity made from sustainable sources.
Well,
okay, it's just kind of weirdly written.
All right on that?
Who's against electrification? I mean,
Well, that's sort of the solution. Even if you use electrification to make hydrogen or some other fuel, it would be by renewable electricity is the notion.
So we're really talking renewable here.
It kind of combines two different. I mean, efficiency is quite independent of using of electrification, but improving insulation and housing, better well mileage, I suppose, on gas using vehicles and so on and so forth would all fit into efficiency.
And I think
I'm still a little confused as to what we mean by electrification.
Ultimately, you want everything to go sort of electric. It's much more efficient generally, and so you want to do that. It's hard to do some things, but ultimately that's what you want to head toward. And if you can't electrify because you need a concentrated fuel, you try and generate that from renewable sources.
Well, how about, we're promoting the use of electricity over other types of energy.
Why?
Right? Is that
Why? Why? I mean, why are we?
I mean,
why
it only. I think Robert's right. I think the only reason that you would want electrification is insofar as the source is better. If electrification is based on burning coal, it's of no advantage whatsoever. So in that sense, electrification by itself doesn't mean much. It has to be tied to electrification based on renewable sources of energy.
So we're really talking about here a focus on the efficiency of energy production, right? Is that what we're really talking about?
well, production and use, because I was going to say that
Production and use, yeah.
because energy efficiency would be actually very important if the energy source is coal. That is if there were big efficiency improvements, then the coal consumption would go down. So I think energy efficiency stands, and
Okay, so how about
maybe that's the only one we use. There is energy efficiency.
can we say then focus on energy efficiency?
Well, there are two separate things you have to do. You have to increase your energy efficiency, which is the amount of energy consumed for each dollar of GDP. And you have to increase your carbon intensity, reduce your carbon intensity or increase your carbon efficiency, which is the amount of carbon emitted for each joule of energy, a megajoule of energy that you consume. So these two metrics combine the conversation that we're having. One is about increasing the efficiency of production and consumption, and the other is about reducing your carbon intensity. And now we're just talking about increasing the energy efficiency, which is great. So we don't need to specify what the...
My impression is that we've already talked about utility scale renewable energy systems and transmissions network. That is switching over to renewable. And then now we're talking about now get more efficient.
Yeah, I think that's right. Renewable energy production covers reduced carbon intensity.
Yeah.
Right? So therefore, we're really talking about increased energy efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right?
Correct.
Okay. We'll just slim down your number 9 to increase energy efficiency. So we're not only talking about what kind of energy, how it's produced, but we must be more efficient in the production of it.
I think that the suggestion is to drop the reference to electrification and just say,
okay, I can see doing that. Let's take out the electrification, and then we're just talking about efficiency. Everybody happy with that? Mike, are you voting? Okay, 1. So we got, well, if you vote, that's 8. All right.
Okay.
Terrific.
I mean, there is interest in getting people to use electricity. That's one of the things to do. That's what electrification sort of meant, but it's sort of it is sort of separate from it.
Okay, let's go on. A campaign to reduce the consumption of living animal protein. 2 of you are 1s, the rest are 2s, I believe.
1, 2, me.
Well, Robin, you are? I didn't know you were a vegan.
I'm not. All it says is reduce living animal protein. That's easy to do.
All right. Okay, now let's go on. Protect forests, wetlands, and mangroves. All right, everybody in favor of that? Let's see,
Yeah,
5.
this is another one that has lots of benefits, but
Exactly.
not necessarily reducing temperature change. But it
All
needs to be sort of part of your,
I
part
have
of it.
seven by 1 and 1 by 2.
Yeah, that one also has the
Going back to
benefit of creating resilience, especially mangroves and
Yeah.
things along those lines, in terms of flood mitigation and things along those lines. So
right, reduce government regulations of energy.
So somebody else was going to say
I was
something.
gonna, I hate to do this, but the thing that made me vote 2 on reducing consumption of living animal proteins was the word campaign, because that means it's not being done. It's being proposed. But if it would have read reduce consumption of living animal proteins, it's a lot like protecting forests and so forth. And so for me, it was the word campaign that made
Yeah,
me
it's fine.
1 and 2.
I actually didn't write down campaign.
Okay, I take responsibility for the word campaign, and I'm perfectly happy to delete it.
And people are doing this already. So anyway,
Would everybody like for me to remove the word campaign?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
it's out.
Okay, let's revote again.
Okay, we're going on. Reduce government regulations of energy use. We're opposed to
Yeah,
reducing
I'm doing two things at once here. Reduce government regulation of what?
energy.
On
energy
energy.
use. In other words,
Okay.
do away with
Okay.
EPA in the US, for example.
6 times 2, 1 times 1, and 1 times 3.
Robert, why are you dead set against this?
Well,
I'm just
I'm
curious.
coming at this particularly from a climate change perspective, and I don't regard biochar as having a significant potential to reduce warming. It's a local environmental benefit, but it isn't scalable.
Well,
Fair enough.
It can scale quite a lot more with using better ways of making the biochar. But yeah, it's not a huge effect.
I disagree with that. I think that the production, the actual physical production of biochar at multiple gigaton scale is wholly unrealistic.
that's assuming it's going to be the single cure or something like that, as opposed to one part of many.
It's just even getting to a couple of gigatons. The numbers just don't make sense. Not just in terms of the sourcing of the biomass, but also in the transport implications, because because biomass is you just have to transport. You have to ship a lot of product. And if you're going to do this on a routine basis of multiple gigatons every year, year after year, you very quickly reach local saturation. You have to then travel further and further distances or put up other installations. And also biochar installations by their nature tend to be quite small in terms of tens of megatons. You don't get a 500 megaton biochar facility. There's a whole stack of reasons in here that listen, I love biochar. It's environmentally great stuff, but it is not scalable as a significant contributor to addressing global warming.
Well, I have a colleague who basically says he would disagree with you.
I'm
And
sure.
he has a grant from the government, if it's still in effect, to build such a plant. He gets money from 3 sources to make it actually profitable. And he was a former head of using waste heat energy and had a whole company that he had going. But you get it from making energy, you get it from enhanced soil things for farmers, and you get it from any carbon credits that come in.
I didn't say, Mike, that it wasn't doable. I didn't say it didn't have benefits. What I said was it's not scalable.
Okay, all right.
I don't think
What was the vote?
It was 1 for 1, 6 for 2, and 1 for 3.
Okay, 161. Okay.
All right, let's go on to direct air capture, meaning, of course, machinery in this case, I think. All right, any conversation about that?
Direct air or direct carbon capture?
Direct air capture of carbon from the air, like
Okay.
Climeworks and and
Okay.
things like that. Okay. 6. We got 6 against it. I don't know. Mike looked like you're.
I'm sort of baffled by this one. I mean, if they can figure out how to do it, it's great, but I'd sort of put it 2 with Robin, I think.
5 times 3, 3 times 2, 5 times 3.
Mhm. All right. Let's go on to iron salt aerosol.
This is something that just simply isn't proven, I don't think. That's the problem I have with it.
Well, okay. Any other conversation before we vote? Okay. Well, let's vote.
1
Six,
times
six,
1 times
I
1
think.
times 1, 5 times 2, and 1 times 3.
I mean, if it's more general, iron fertilization or ocean fertilization, that's something different.
Yeah.
Can we make it more general, Meta? Can we just
Yeah,
say
because
ocean iron
Seb, your
fertilization?
approach is different.
No, because he's quite explicit that we can never really sprinkle, and probably shouldn't sprinkle it all over the ocean. It's a bad idea.
I
But
believe we should.
only, but this is the distinct, we could have put this in the category, but I made this as local because that's what he is insisting is important. That
I'd say concentrated rather than local. I mean, he's trying to get it in just particular spots where he thinks water is going down.
because he says that it doesn't necessarily go where you want it to, and it doesn't necessarily have the effects. But if you put it in an eddy, it's going to be sure and pull your phytoplankton down.
I think that the important factor in this regard is that if you make it more generalized, you're going to get algae blooms that have a devastating impact on fish populations in various places. Whereas in areas where in the middle of the ocean where there's little marine life, and especially in eddies, you can get the algae that's or allow the algae to grow that immediately settles into deep trenches and things along those lines where the environmental disruption will be less severe. If you generalize it to a greater extent, you have a far greater amount of unintended consequences, some of which might be quite devastating.
And
So by local, we're talking about not large scale, or it could be large scale, but
could be large
in
scale.
small areas.
Yeah.
Not just the scale of it. It's he doesn't want it all over the ocean because it can have bad side effects. But but if you do it in eddies, it's where the ocean is going to pull the stuff down to the bottom, and you can be sure that you're not creating pollution that way because the stuff's going to be set down.
no bad effects have been detected in 13 different ocean experiments with this. This is a fantasy. The only bad effects you get are when there's too much from continental runoff and you get dead zones.
Well, but those experiments have not measured what goes into long-term storage. They just haven't been big enough in general to measure.
That's true, but they haven't found any bad effects.
Are you opposed
Right.
to
It
this?
just may not be working. Right. Yeah.
Are you opposed to doing this?
Well, I'm not. This is a question about whether we are opposed to the research. This is definitely not proven. So it's not a question of saying whether we want to do it or not do it. The question is whether you want to research it further or not.
Yeah.
I wish
So-
some of you guys had been here when Peter Fikowski came. I asked him to come and explain exactly this process because I was aware that I think it's a fairly new intervention. I haven't heard much of it, but I did have one episode of my series with Peter. And here comes Paul Werbos back. I mean, I could have put in OIF, but I didn't. I put in local because that is a specification of a part, an aspect, or one type of OIF that I thought nobody would oppose, but somebody might oppose the OIF itself.
I think the point here, Meta, is that Peter has got a particular idea about how to solve all our problems, because he thinks that this process is scalable to tens of gigatons of carbon sequestration a year. Now, the whole point is that he acknowledges that he doesn't know and that they need to do the research. So, but a lot of people think he's crazy and that he's wrong. But there is no reason why anybody should want to stand in the way of doing the research, because he could be right, despite all the detractors. And if he's right, then it would be great. If he's wrong,
from my understanding, the criteria you were using, that would be a 2. And that was the reason I was voting 2.
absolutely.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
would agree.
That's correct. So let's re-vote on this, okay?
Can we retitle
I want to be
it?
clear about why. I thought that there would be people who would oppose OIF because, for example, the Canadian government made West George stop doing it. So there may be still people who say it is a risky thing. So I put in a version of it that I thought nobody would oppose to at least trying, experimenting with, because according to him, according to Peter, that reduces the threat that is posed by the phytoplankton that would be excessive, conceivably, and maybe dangerous if spread on all over the ocean. So that's why I chose it. And if what I'm hearing is some of you want to take off the local iron OIF. And
Can you say ocean eddy iron fertilization? I mean, say where it is, because it doesn't even say ocean in it at the moment. And so how about ocean eddy iron fertilization?
That's a good idea. Yeah.
so you want to change the title from local to
To ocean eddy iron fertilization.
Yeah, drop local.
ocean
eddy iron fertilization.
All right.
I mean, you could say targeted too, but anyway, I think that's fine because it's more specific.
All right.
Okay, let's re-vote on that.
Okay, let's vote on this now. How many? Okay. I'm counting one. Now 1-1.
There's two ones. Robert, you're 2. Okay, so we have 9 voting this time. No, is that no 3s? Is that right?
No 3s.
Okay.
Now here we have enhanced rock weathering.
This is another scaling item, right? Which is if you do it at a large enough scale, it becomes relatively expensive as you have to move stuff around. But and that's the caveat that needs to be researched, or
Well, it can be done everywhere. I did have a long series of shows about that, and it's very good for the environment. It's very good for agriculture. It's like biochar and stuff with agriculture. So there's a rationale for doing it for its own sake. But it is true that you should try to use rocks. There are many kinds of rocks that are available, and you should try to use rocks that are fairly local, because if you have to ship rocks any distance, unless you do it by ship, of course, it's cheap, but by train or especially trucks, it's not efficient. So but you can usually find rocks in your neighborhood. The right kind of rocks that will work for that. That's my conclusion on the basis of maybe 5 different shows that I did in 2024, I think. Anyway.
So is this something that we know it works, but what we don't know is whether the scale is feasible? Is that one of those?
No, I think the question is whether you were put off by the fact that rocks are heavy and that you're going to have to move them. So the reality is it's good if you can find rocks right next door.
But it's costly.
If you can't find rocks that are handy, then you would have to transport them so far that it doesn't make sense.
Or you wouldn't do it.
Or you would do it.
Yeah.
But what the government could do is make maps of where there are suitable rocks. They don't have such maps. I looked for them. And among the main things that you could use is tailings from mining. when they mine stuff, they bring up, rocks and leave it in piles that can then be easily recycled or used for agriculture.
Can I just make a few comments?
Mine tailings usually have various issues with toxicity and so on. That I don't know whether. I mean, I think it's worth studying. We certainly have plenty of mine tailings that need to be taken care of. So if they can be easily spread on fields and absorb carbon, that would be great. But if in the process they add cyanide to the soil and various other things of that sort, then that becomes highly problematic. So. I would put myself in the skeptical category.
Yeah, well, in the shows that I put on, I invited this guy at the UBC, who's Gregory somebody, I think, who is a specialist in mine tailings and the use. And of course, that's one of the things that has to be done, is you have to test the content of the mine tailings, because it can be, some is toxic, some not. It's a very cheap way of getting your rocks if they're handy and if they're not poisonous. And then it's great.
There's another factor here. The basic chemistry of the weathering process is that for every, and this is assuming 100% efficiency, that for every ton of carbon dioxide that you sequester, you have to handle in some way 15 tons of material. That's the multiplier, assuming 100% efficiency. So if you want to sequester, let's say 1 gigaton of carbon dioxide, you've got to move 15 gigatons of material. This is another one of these applications that makes lots of engineering sense, but makes no global sense because it's just not chemically efficient enough.
It is, because they want to put this stuff on their soil anyway. They already have these dusting machines that are used for spreading various.
Fine. I'm wrong. It's good. I'm quite happy to withdraw.
So,
I crunched the numbers. I looked at it, and fine.
So I put a link to an MIT report where they say it's expensive and hard to scale, and I don't know anything about it, but I'm gonna vote 2 on this one, and it'll be a very low priority if we get around to doing priorities.
Yeah, I would.
So that's 6 times 2 and 2 times 3.
Yeah, I should say I would vote against any government action now except for research and incentives for any of the true geoengineering technologies I've heard people talk about, with the single exception of one of the technologies for removing CO2 from the atmosphere. It can be done by burning the white rock in limited areas like Afghanistan. That one is proven safe, and I wouldn't have the government do it, but I do think the economic incentives are justified. With the other technologies, the economic incentives are not justified until we have a better understanding of the environmental implications.
But that's great. I agree with you entirely, Paul. The bad news is that by the time we have that understanding, the game will be lost.
We're fried.
Don't worry about that. That's the direction we're headed.
So we should just fly the airplane and hope it doesn't crash.
Absolutely. When you are in a crisis, you take risks. And that's the truth of the matter. If you want something that is risk-free, then go to bed.
Okay. Ocean alkalinity enhancement. That's where you're going to take some olivine rock or something and smash it up and scatter it.
Does it have to be olivine, or can it be anything that neutralizes acidity?
I think it's everything that can neutralize acidity, but the olivine is apparently extremely accessible.
But will that actually reduce any carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or will it merely compensate for the amount of acidity that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is already adding to the ocean?
Pretty much the latter.
The latter. It's not really a climate temperature reduction. It's just, it's actually what you do if some of the other elements that do work for climate mitigation cause this problem in the ocean. So you therefore have to address that. Yeah.
If your mussel beds are dissolving under too much acidity, you can locally add a bit of alkali to reduce that.
Save some of the coral reefs that are suffering from acidification. But will it do anything for the climate? That seems
Not much.
questionable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I wouldn't be opposed to it in general, but in this, since we're talking about climate, I would have to vote 3.
Yeah, but this could be one of those very low priority, but a good thing to do issues. I mean, it could be if it enables some of the other technologies, but have these negative side effects in the oceans. You would definitely want to combine it.
Yeah, but look, here's my understanding, and correct me, I think Mike can probably correct me best. When there's a balance between the CO2 in the ocean and in the atmosphere. If you take it out of if you put it in the ocean, it exacerbates the acidity of the ocean. So the more we put CO2 into the ocean, and oceans are now accepting something like 70% of the CO2, then we're making the oceans more and more acid, and we're killing the critters, and reaching a tipping point where we don't know how much more CO2 the ocean can absorb because it makes it acid. So you can offset that by putting alkali into the ocean and compensating for the acidification, which is, as I understand it, the biggest problem with the ocean now is it's too acid. Now, am I wrong, Mike?
No, I think you're absolutely right, but it still does not do anything about the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and thus about warming. It is merely putting a Band-Aid on one of the problems that's created by all the carbon dioxide that we're pumping into the atmosphere, the way that I
But
see it.
that's also the case for some of the other points here.
And maybe there's nothing
Are
wrong
going
with
to have it. So this is
Yeah.
sort of doing something. Here's where you might put local, or small scale. Trying to change the acidity of the global ocean would be, a humongous challenge. But there are local areas, whether it's over coral and in lagoons or other things, where it's probably worth seeing if it's possible. And I think there's some efforts actually, aren't there? I mean, it's Greg Rauer here. I think he'd tell us all about the efforts that are going on. I thought there's even
Well, I
companies.
think it's Greg Rao who's the main proponent of this ocean alkalinity enhancement.
Yeah, but I think it's sort of mostly local. It's about what you're going to be able to do anything with. But maybe I'm wrong.
But oceans have currents, so anything that's introduced into an ocean in a local area is going to wander from
Yeah,
there to other areas.
Well,
So
that's why you have to keep doing it in small areas. But yeah.
And also remember that, of course, as you reduce the CO2 in the ocean, it's going to affect the atmosphere because it equilibrates all the time.
I thought they try and tie it up in other ways
But,
without it leading to emissions to the atmosphere.
whilst we've been talking, I've just checked, and actually pH, olivine doesn't have a defined pH, but in seawater, it does initially make it more alkaline.
Yeah, it does. What it does is to exchange the silicate in the rock with carbonate. So it is neutral, but it does absorb CO2 by that means, and therefore makes it a little bit less acid.
I think we did not have a proper discussion because I think this is one where I don't think many of us are very clear about what this involves. But we're going to vote on it anyway, I guess. Do we need to have more conversation before we vote? Okay.
I don't feel that I can vote against it because it seems that it might enable some of the other technologies. It may aid. So let's say it was used locally, for instance, and the problem of acidification may be worsened by some of the technologies that we support, and therefore using this as an antidote locally, saving this or that and in the coastal area, it may be complementary. It's the word I should mean. So I can't vote against it, even if it's not a huge contributor to cooling, or not a contributor to conclude. It probably doesn't belong here, but I still can't vote against it.
But if the question was, what can we do if we were convened to talk about what can we do to protect vulnerable coral reefs in the context of climate change, this would be a high priority to pursue.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
But for the questions we've asked, I don't see a clear articulation of if you succeed in increasing alkalinity, that you make a dramatic increase in the capacity of the oceans to absorb carbon. So I'm inclined to vote 3 because it's specific to the question we're asking. It has not been advanced that it's going to be an effective boost to the carbon sink.
Yeah, I would agree with Greg on this. Absolutely.
I mean, I think it might be a great thing to do. It might be a fantastic thing to do. It's just the question that's posed to us. It doesn't seem like it's a direct hit.
So go back to rock weathering. Then
Same
should
argument.
the 3 as well?
Yes.
It's the same argument.
Yes, for the same reasons.
Yeah.
Are you wanting to re-vote on rock weathering?
No.
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 Okay, well, leave it alone, but we
Let's
will
vote on this.
this now. Okay, let's say your votes. That's 2 for Sev.
And 3 threes.
All right, now we go to the 4th meeting where we get into everything is some version of albedo enhancement. I think that's the whole purpose. And the first one is marine cloud brightening. And I guess everybody knows what that is. Is there any debate about that?
You're not voting, Gregory?
Oh, I'm still thinking about it. So
Okay.
Mike, what? I can't see all your fingers.
So that's 1-1.
3? Is 3 or 2?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 6, 1.
Robert, is your vote about it being scalable or?
Yeah, I think that from what I've learned of marine cloud brightening, I think the real problem is a technological one. I think that making these nozzles to create the spray in a fashion that is workable and scalable is just there are easy ways of making bread.
I think people have made the spray. My problem with it is generally that if it's finely related to how much you put in, you have to have an incredible observation system in order to know whether you're going to make it brighter or whether you're going to cause precipitation or do nothing. But that would be my 3. But I think people have done some interesting things with sprays. But
that's not.
But there's a whole bunch of problems about doing it in enough places.
There's a whole. I mean, I just don't think it is a scalable technology. I can see it as having great local benefits. If they can make it work, I can see it having local benefits. But that's not what I'm about. I'm about global climate change, global warming, and I don't think it has the potential to make a significant contribution there.
Okay, now I actually, I should have clarified this before we took a vote because I'm myself confused. Since that pipeline article and people becoming aware of the importance of low clouds and the diminishing of low clouds, I'm hearing people talk about how all we have to do is spray from ships and try to replenish some of the aerosols, which could be done with just salt water locally. And it sounds like a homemade version of marine cloud brightening in which we're not talking about tiny particles in high up, but rather low-level clouds, increasing low-level clouds. But it's sort of otherwise sort of sounds like marine cloud brightening. So straighten me out, because I think these should be two different things.
What's the other one? I thought we were talking about MCB right now.
Well, I'm saying that besides MCB, which I think I used to know what that was, it was tiny nanoparticles of droplets that would go up high and make make the clouds whiter. But
Yeah.
what we're saying now, I'm hearing people say, well, the ship stopped using sulfur, and so there are fewer clouds, but we could replenish the clouds that we used to have, not talking about marine cloud brightening as such, but we could replenish these low level clouds by simply having ships spray
Oh, I
sea.
see. Okay, so you're talking about creation of clouds rather than enhancement of existing clouds.
But it's really all MCB.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah, same thing, better.
Yeah.
So it is the same thing. And when
Well, in one case you're brightening clouds, and in the other case you're creating clouds. In both cases, you're whitening.
Yeah. There's also a Dutch company that's pushing that Jesper Peterson sort of is promoting, that basically says you want to inject water into the lower atmosphere so it forms clouds and then forms clouds and goes over land. I think I'm pretty skeptical of the physics of it, because if you try and increase the moisture level, so this is aimed at increasing water, not CCN. But if you increase it, that reduces the gradient for natural evaporation, and so I think it doesn't do much, and it doesn't carry over land. But there is a group that is preparing equipment to do a test, and somehow has lots of money to put sprayers up on offshore windmills, wind power.
are they calling this marine cloud brightening, or is this an alteration in marine cloud brightening, or
No, it's actually an effort. They're hoping that the moisture goes over the land and is condensed as precipitation at night and creates vegetation. So,
It is all marine cloud brightening. Only marine cloud brightening has got a number of aspects. One, to make more CCNs, one, to make more clouds, one, to make sea salt aerosols, and one, to add more moisture to the air so it can precipitate down somewhere else.
yeah, but
That's all MCB.
Water vapor is a greenhouse effect as well. A strong greenhouse.
Yeah, but the transpiration effect is good too.
okay? Well, now this is very unfortunate, because we voted on marine
Well,
cloud,
let's see if anybody wants to change their vote.
but now I don't know how we're going to divide that up into 4 or 5 different.
Well, I don't think we have to. I think they'll call it MCB, and it includes all of the above, with the caveats noted. And so it could be adding clouds that weren't there, adding moisture that could become clouds, or could be dropped as rainfall. And
You could call it marine cloud brightening and enhancement if you want to be inclusive or something, I guess.
yeah, do you want to do that, Meta?
It's not my choice. It's a question of try to be clear about what we're talking about.
Yeah, brightening kind of implies one thing, but it doesn't have to. Brightening is like a more white. If you're creating a cloud, I mean, you're still becoming more white. And if you're adding water that becomes cloud, you're still becoming more white. So it really is all the same thing. I mean, let's not complicate it. When we
I mean, if Stephen Salter were here, I don't know whether he would agree, because he made it his whole everything to him depended on getting the right kind of nozzle. He said, we're not really ready for marine cloud brightening for another 3 or 4 years because we don't have the right nozzles, and you can't do it with it unless you're doing the right nozzles. So this was a guy who basically invented it, and if we're making a lot of assumptions about changing it.
Well, that's an argument for 2 and not an argument for 1.
Yep.
Right? 2 being some unknown elements, 1 being assured and known workable.
Yep.
So, and does anybody want to change their vote? Right now, I've got 1 person is a 1, 6 people are 2s, and 1 person is a 3.
Let's leave it at that.
Leave it at that, Seth. Okay.
Yep.
So we've done the marine cloud brightening. How about surface albedo enhancement? That's where you paint things white, mostly.
But it could also be nanobubbles. It could also be mirrors. It could also be, spreading white stuff on surfaces. It could also be phase change materials which change from white to black when it gets dark. It can be all those things.
We also have a category called buoyant reflective flakes. And I would have assumed that some of these other things like mirrors and nanobubbles go in with, they're compatible with that and different. But because this whole category, the whole fourth meeting was about how to improve albedo. So all of these things are basically albedo promoting technologies, the marine cloud brightening and this painting things white. And then we go on to these buoyant flakes. And then finally, SAI.
Of the Earth's albedo of 30%, about 25% of that, so 25% of solar radiation is reflected by clouds. So there's only about 5% that you can work with over the whole Earth. And a lot of the even though the ocean's part of it, and then there's the land, though the land is smaller, it is brighter when you have the Sahara and you have snow and ice and some of the open fields and stuff. So you have to do an awful lot of brightening to try and have an effect on the global albedo that way. It just turns out because there's just not much that gets through the cloud cover when it starts.
So I think that's true, and the argument for surface albedo enhancement is not going to have a global impact on heat. It is a local improvement, a cooling locally that can also have some impact on heating and cooling, air conditioning and furnaces by reducing the heat domes and so on. So it's a local enhancement that provides time. This is the argument. Those people who like Akbari in Montreal, they do not argue that this will dramatically or significantly reduce global warming. What they argue is it buys time to use some of these other to deploy some of these other technologies that are uncertain by cooling cities in particular, so that people can live in a heated world, in a more uncomfortable world. That's the argument for it, and I think it's a good argument for doing it. It's actually quite workable. It's known to have impact. The data is pretty good, but it's definitely local, only local.
I would disagree with that, Robin. Ice thickening can be do all of the poles. Nanobubbles in the ocean can do the most 80% of the ocean's brightening it. Buoyant flakes can make the dark blue ocean greener and brighter. MCB can reflect a lot of light. So they can pretty much all have at least regional and probably global effect.
Right.
But otherwise, you're right.
Yeah. So and I agree with what you just said. So when I see surface albedo, I'm looking at whitening roofs and lightening of pavements almost entirely, right?
I agree with you on that.
Maybe we need to separate these categories a little bit so that we don't confuse them.
Yes, please do.
As I have it now, we've got these two things split. We're talking about surface albedo enhancement, which is mostly painting things white, or sidewalks.
Or local mirrors are proposed to.
Yeah, local for sure.
Let's call it local. The distinction The distinction is between marine and terrestrial.
What?
Marine and what?
Between marine and land. And that's the distinction.
Really? Well, okay. If we can agree on that, that's an easy thing to clarify. We're talking, okay, here we're just talking about land stuff.
So
And
terrestrial
plates would be
terrestrial surface brightening. Is that right?
terrestrial surface. Okay.
It's hard to do enough land really to do a difference. That's why Robin's suggesting, and I think, reporting on, you do urban areas in some sense, and you can try and reduce heat domes, which is kind of important. I mean, there are all kinds of ideas we've had in the past, brighten, biologically change the genes and make plants brighter or something like that, that you go, holy Toledo, I'm not sure I want to get into anything like that could spread.
Yeah.
And stuff. So it's not general land brightening. That's hard. That's very hard to do or something. But urban area brightening is
So
something.
let's call it urban surface albedo enhancement. Yeah,
Okay.
but Sev, let me just ask you this question. When you said terrestrial as distinct from marine, what are you talking about that's terrestrial, that's non-urban?
Well, you could talk about putting
Trees?
multiple square kilometers of mirrors in the desert. There's all sorts of things you could do. I mean, I think that because the fundamental distinction, I mean, let me just say, I regard both of these as being infeasible in terms of having a genuine global temperature effect.
Unscalable.
The marine environment has the advantage that it's huge, so you have the potential for scaling. But the problem is that the reality is that you're not going to scale, and because as Sev's numbers demonstrate, the enhancement that you can get in albedo on the ocean is very modest. So which means you've got to multiply the area by another factor of 2 or 3. I mean, we're talking about crazy numbers here. I mean, people, the scale is just unreal. So on land, I think that you have the problems that Mike is talking about. It has great local benefits, and there is the potential of doing these things, in large desolate areas where you might want to put mirrors or other forms of reflection. The other category that we didn't ever include, and actually I regard as being increasingly one of the most attractive, is space mirrors. Because I don't think you covered that, Meta, but I think that space mirrors actually are becoming bizarrely are going to compete with SAI. There are going to be 2 methods of doing this. When it all shakes down, there are going to be 2 methods. One is SAI and the other is space mirrors. And all the rest is going to go by the wayside. So that's my personal estimation, because they are the 2 that are genuinely scalable and that deliberately do not have regional impacts. And the reason that not having regional impacts is important is because regional differences will just make the politics incredibly complicated. So you have winners and losers. So SAI at a global scale and space mirrors, great. All the rest are games to play, but I don't think and we can research them. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at them, but we need to be kind of sanguine about the reality of them going very far.
The question, Robert, is time scale.
Yeah.
And I mean, so you might do the SAI aerosol first, and it does have a saturation point, so you get out of it. Yeah. But then you might well move to space mirrors as it becomes more feasible.
We could get space mirrors up and running in 2 decades, if there was the political will and the funding. This is
You could get polar SAI up within a decade,
exactly.
within 5 years.
Exactly. The timing here is it's not the engineering that's the problem. The engineering is not the problem on any of these things. The problem is the political will and the determination to do it, and the fund. And actually, even the funding isn't the problem, because if the political will was there and the international collaboration was there, then the funding would be available. So this is all of the things that make these options palatable, achievable, realistic, whatever terms you want to use, are all to do with the international politics of them, not to do with the technology. The technology will very quickly sort out the winners and losers.
Okay,
And my estimation is that will be straightforward.
let's get back to business. I want to have a vote on this surface albedo enhancement, which we now call urban surface albedo enhancement. Is that right?
Two, one,
Two ones, one, three, and the rest are twos.
2, 4, 1. Is that right?
Now we can move on to the ocean.
Not too fast here. Hold on.
Buoyant flakes, and we're talking about now not just buoyant flakes, but nano bubbles, which I don't think we've discussed adequately. And we can't introduce the idea now on any scale. But we're talking, maybe, Sam, aren't you the buoyant?
No, the buoyant flakes we're talking about here are not my buoyant flakes. We're talking here about buoyant flakes to reflect sunlight themselves. Mine don't do that. Mine. So you either stick with what you've got,
So
or
this
go and talk about mine.
Is your thing, is it still an albedo project?
Mine is both an albedo and a CDR project. Yes. It's the albedo from the light colour of the phytoplankton, and it's CDR because you're turning carbon dioxide from the air into phytoplankton, some of which will sink.
What is the problem with combining them and still saying we're talking about any kind of buoyant flakes?
Well, the buoyant flakes which you've got in yours is only about albedo. It's not about growing, not about growing phytoplankton.
Well,
we're in the category of albedo here. We're in the category of albedo. So this would be reflective buoyant flakes. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you either talk about reflective buoyant flakes or buoyant flakes. They're two different things.
All right. So if we've agreed that we're going to take yours out, that's too bad. But I could have put it someplace, but I don't know enough about it. Okay. So we're voting on reflective buoyant flakes, where the project is these little things float on the ocean and they're light color. So we change the color of the ocean.
Yeah. What would these little things be?
They very quickly get covered in biofilm and they're no longer reflective.
So you don't believe in it?
No.
Yeah, it seems.
And also you have to cover a huge amount of ocean with it.
The scale is incredible.
Yeah. And are we talking about little like flakes of micro
micro or something like that? Yeah.
Styrofoam, or what would these flakes be made of?
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were talking micro bubbles. I thought you were saying first.
No, not micro bubbles. That's
nano bubbles. I'm sorry.
Well, hold on, because I thought we had decided that we're going to include with this nano bubbles.
But these are flakes. These are flakes, not micro bubbles.
No, I know, but I've heard these put together as somehow they all belong together in say similar kind of logic.
They don't belong together. They do have one similar effect, but they don't belong together.
Well, I didn't set it up right, guys. I'm sorry. So I don't want to create confusion. I wish I had divided these up in a consistent way.
So vote on what you've got, and we'll leave it at that. Vote on the reflective buoyant flakes.
And we're not going to include nanobubbles because that's a different kind of...
No nanobubbles and none of my buoyant flakes.
Let's have a vote.
7 threes.
Okay, now we get to SAI.
I would like to say something on SAI, if I might. Is that okay?
Sure.
To me, SAI is almost a non-starter. In the Southern Ocean, there are too few airports that can be used for the work. I've got to read the stuff. The airplanes to deliver the SO2 and perform the altitude stuff are not yet designed. The current ones would have trouble reaching a good altitude when fully laden, and there's a huge risk of increasing the size of the ozone hole in the Southern Ocean. Whilst SAI in the Arctic would require the approval of most of the European nations, most of the American nations, most of the Northern Asian countries, and would risk the airports being hit by North Korean missiles if North Korea didn't like the idea of them. So I don't see much. While I like the idea in a way of SAI, I don't see it as being all that feasible.
I think that I have to say, Sev, I agree with you totally. But I think that sadly, those observations, in one way or another, apply to every single global scale intervention. Ultimately, this is all going to come down to the politics, and the politics are not at all favourable.
Yeah.
So Sev, though your issue about planes not yet designed and all that stuff, that applies to global SAI as opposed to polar SAI.
No, it applies to polar too, because the current planes, and they're old planes which can do it, will only just about reach the level, and stuff won't stay up there very long, and they will probably still make an ozone hole in the Arctic as well as the Antarctic.
So you only would do polar SI for a couple of months in the summer when the sun is at peak level, after the surface albedo has thawed. You're not going to do it all year round. It makes no sense at all. The ozone hole is a winter phenomenon, and because you only have to do it in the summer, you actually, and so I've been sort of suggesting you can do it in the upper troposphere. You don't have to even go into the stratosphere. You just would have to probably do a bit more of the injection but there aren't many removal mechanisms of sulfate in the summer atmosphere in the Arctic because there aren't many thunderstorms. You don't get much rain and everything like that. So
that's true.
So it lasts, and you only have to go, I mean, right now the albedo melt is in maybe June or something like that. And you certainly only go into August. You certainly don't go till the sun sets or something like that. So it's a much different kind of thing than polar. Polar is really hard, and that's where I think Robert's thing about satellites is going to be, and mirrors in space is going to come into play. But polar, as an interim one, I think is not so complicated. I'm not sure. I think that not having quite enough airports makes the difference, but because I think you can make airports or something like that.
Yeah, but the politics is really bad in the Arctic.
So I
think the Russians on side.
I think the difficulties and concerns and so on are real. I also think that SAI is the most promising impact if it works, and therefore this is a absolute number two. This is the most important number two by far, because
I'm happy to have it as number two. I would downgrade its importance, but have it as two.
Absolutely.
I would actually put it to one. And the meeting I was at yesterday was talking about how a number of international environmental groups are coming around to think that it's actually something that will be necessary because the alternative is much worse.
Yeah, the alternative is definitely much worse.
If
you got more on that, Mike, I'd be really interested to see these environmental groups that are coming around, because I haven't seen any indication of that, except a couple of people talking, but no groups that I've seen.
Look at the SRM 360 seminar from yesterday at Earth Day here. Mike Tidwell was one from Chesapeake Climate Action Network, which is one of the really largest ones. But they've had NRDC and Environmental Defense, and even are talking with the Sierra Club about it, that people are just getting very concerned about how serious the issue is. And that mitigation is simply not, all mitigation is going to lose how much further warming we have. And that could be double what we have now. And so what are you going to do about that? I think you try SII and see what you can do. That's why I would state
Okay,
it.
I think we should take a vote now.
The notion is, by the way, that a few countries would start doing it and are people going to say no? So
Okay, let's see here. We have
2, 5, 2 and 5, eh? No threes.
I propose that we write up a document as kind of outlining the list of interventions that we look upon as reasonable things to pursue, and highlight the ones that we want to consider well proven and ready to roll, that we should be number one. So and then this one document, you can do what you want to with it. I think we should not claim to be anything bigger than we are, a bunch of people talking about and speculating about things that we have insufficient evidence to promote. But nevertheless, it's better than nothing. So I think what we're going to need is 2 or 3 of you to get together by Zoom or something and take this report, that the votes that Robin has done. I will make a transcript of our conversation and make that available to whomever decides to do the work, and that will, I think with that, what we could do is put in asterisks, so that each intervention where we have some qualification or caveat or doubt or enthusiasm, we can put it in as a footnote kind of thing. Here's why we think we have special consideration about this particular thing. And I think that document could be not more than 2 pages long. And then we can post it and make it available to everybody on Substack and to all of your groups and whatever you want. Gregory.
So I think it was Robin's point that this 1, 2, and 3 is a classification as opposed to a ranking. But one of the things that we could do before we leave in the next few minutes is, as we're signing off, and none of you would have it because you've got the chat, we could decide on, we list our top 3 priorities or top 5 priorities, and then that would, so we're not really voting on it, but there might be some consensus about priorities. And so whether it's a 1 or a 2, I guess we're not going to prioritize number 3s, but whether it's a 1 or a 2, we might prioritize it. And so anyway, I suggest we each of us put our top 3 or top 5 priorities in the chat as we're signing off.
Okay. Other people thinking, how do you feel about that? Mike?
I would just note that not any of the number ones will really help to limit things much other than what we're doing with respect to mitigation. I mean, it might speed that up, but with that situation, we're going to be heading toward 2.5 or 3 degrees. I mean, there's no real, it's all related to mitigation and trying to do that faster. And meanwhile, we have global emissions still going up a little bit. So one has to do that. And so then you get to the prospects of number 2. Can you do anything? And trying to decide, those are the ones that can have a chance of making a difference, of trying to get to the Paris Accord. So the first conclusion might well be that looking at priorities the way we did is to basically say that mitigation isn't going to be enough to keep us within the Paris Accord of 2 degrees, much less 1.5. But
okay. Anybody else on this?
If I like Gregory's suggestion of everyone's top 3. I don't know if anybody could could say that out loud. I was going to say that maybe the top three should incorporate just those that actually have an impact on global warming rather than the other elements. But maybe that's not a fair request because some of the other things are highly doable and therefore maybe something that, some people want to say, let's do that because it's easy, even if it doesn't have a great impact global warming per se directly. So there's two approaches there.
Maybe do the top three in category 1 and the top three in category 2.
Say it again.
Is a way to try and offer some
Category
hope.
1 would be.
Yeah, but we can figure that one out by just looking at the numbers on the votes, right?
Right.
Uh,
This is, I mean, I don't think the vote should be seen, for the people who are writing this report, I don't think the vote should be seen as mandatory or locked in, but I think it just would help to compress some of the various things to give a clue as to where people are leaning.
Each of you, please figure out your top three, and then we will let you say them and go around and finish it off that way. Is that would be okay? And then Robin can take note.
so
I thought the system that we voted on, if we like something in category 1, then we're saying do it, right? That we believe that it would work and you should just start doing it. And if it's in category 2, the reasons it was in category 2, at least for my voting, was either it involved complex and uncertain political arrangements like treaties, and or the scientific scalability, or the science isn't done yet on that. So that was the reason I was voting too. And so if that was a number 2 could be a top priority, which means get on with the research, right? Support the research, get on with it, scale it, do what you need to do to see if this can work. But so it could be prioritized, even though we're saying we're not ready to walk out the door and start doing it tomorrow. Get 3D, get to work on the science, and get this ready to roll out.
That's certainly how I understood it.
Okay, I suggest this. I'm going to do this at least one step first. I'm going to go and ask each of you to say what your top priority, 1, 2, or your top priority of let's get started with this because we're serious. Let's get going. And we're in favor of just that. And how many of those are yours? So you read them out, which ones you're doing, and then we'll come maybe talk about doing something else later, okay?
Do you want top
Someone got
1
a
or
whole
top
list
3?
of them all.
Hmm?
Someone got a list of them all, which they can put up on the screen.
I'll give you 2 minutes to look through these as I scroll down, and you make a list of the ones that you're saying that you personally think are high priority, and let's get going with them. All right? And then we'll ask you to announce them publicly. Okay. Fair enough? I'm showing you this. Can you see it? Is this working?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, who would start?
Okay, I'll call on you.
give us a few more minutes here, just a second.
Have you all got your list down? Then here we go. I'll call on you. Gregory, your turn.
Well, so I put down 4 instead of 3, so I cheated. But fossil fuel subsidy ban, utility scale renewable energy systems, local ocean iron fertilization, and stratospheric aerosol injection. Those were the.
Thank you. Okay, Sev.
Okay, I have 1 ocean eddy fertilization, 2 iron salt aerosols, 3 MCB.
Mike?
1, I say utility scale renewable and transmission. I think the transmission's critical. 2, I think I'd say methane reduction, which is not the iron aerosol one, but just existing emissions. And 3, I'd say SAI.
Thank you. Robert? Chris?
I think I would just say SAI as number 1.
Mm.
And That's the only one I'll list. I'm not really, I think all of the others are nice to have, but they're not mission critical.
Okay, Robin?
The only one I have is SAI so far. I'm scanning the others. I'm still going through them.
Okay, I'll come back to you then. Alexi?
Well, I think regenerative agriculture, then energy efficiency, increasing energy efficiency, and then the third one would be geoengineering.
Okay,
Is
you mean that
geoengineering one?
prepare the accord or something?
Number 5.
Okay. And aren't.
I would say utility scale renewable energy systems. I would also vote for SAI, and I would also suggest regenerative agriculture.
All right, thank you. All right, now and Robin, come back.
MCB is my second one. Utility scale renewable energy production and transmission, third one.
Now we can go through
I'll
and
add that one into mine as well. Utility scale renewables. I'll make that number 2.
add that to yours. Okay, each of you please enter it into the chat. What you've said. And don't change it, because if you
With these top 3, when we put them together, we can actually come up with a combined top 5, say, or top 6 out of the 24 or whatever it was.
I don't think we need to do another go round with trying to find other criteria, but if you guys want to do it, I'm happy to have that done, but
I was going to volunteer Mike to write this up.
I was going to volunteer you. Yeah.
well, great. We've got an agreement. We got
Okay, well, you do the first draft and I'll fix it, Mike.
Okay, I'll try something. Okay.
Okay.
And anybody else who wants to join this committee, you're welcome. Well, this has been fun. All right. Shall we say goodbye? Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.